Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well, having a good Tuesday. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today, especially after last night's 3-hour edition of Monday Night Raw on the USA Network. So let's get straight into today's stories. And speaking of Monday Night Raw, let's start off with Randy Orton, because Randy Orton's promo to kick off last night's Monday Night Raw certainly has a lot of people talking, not necessarily just the promo, but that look, because Randy Orton has revealed a new mask look on Monday Night Raw last night. Now, of course, last week, Monday Night Raw closed with a returning Alexa Bliss attacking Randy Orton with a fireball, but last night on Monday Night Raw, Randy Orton kicked off the show and delivered a promo with a white mask on in a completely dark background. Now, his face looks red and swollen. Obviously, results of the attack last week and burnt. Randy Orton said, quote, "I'm wearing this mask not only to protect myself, but to shield everyone else from the horror I endured." Now, Randy Orton kicked off Raw, as I mentioned, with a cryptic promo. He cut a fantastic promo with the mask on to start Monday Night Raw last night. He was full of anger and hatred, claiming that it was a mistake to show mercy to Alexa Bliss several weeks ago when he had the opportunity to set her ablaze in the same way that he had done to The Fiend at TLC back in December. Now, Orton revealed that he had first-degree burns after last week's attack and stated he does not blame Alexa, but instead he blames The Fiend Bray Wyatt, who he said is using her. Randy Orton then claimed that he knows every WWE superstar in the locker room enjoyed watching his burnt face, as they thought that would save them from him at the Royal Rumble inside the 30-man Royal Rumble match. However, Randy Orton insisted that even if he's got his limbs cut off, he would still enter the Royal Rumble and win it to main event WrestleMania 37. He claimed he would remain in the Royal Rumble match and statistically said he enjoys the pain. Orton said, quote, "Despite my sickening affliction, I vow to remain in the Royal Rumble match. I can compete as long as I can tolerate the pain. The funny thing is, I enjoy the pain." Now, in terms of this promo, I mean, this was really interesting. It was really, really interesting because obviously, as soon as I saw this look, and as soon as I saw this promo, the first thing that went into my head is this is going to divide people. This is going to polarize people. People are going to hate this and enjoy it at the same time. Myself, personally, I really liked it. I did really like it. I think, strip away all the mask and the backdrop, the fire and the Fiend and all that kind of stuff. Let's just focus on the promo first. The promo itself I thought was fantastic. I think Randy Orton right now, is he the best promo in WWE? He is really up there, and it's an arguable point. He's the best promo in the business right now. Randy Orton has been one of the best promos in WWE for the past 12 months. Ever since he turned heel after the Royal Rumble nearly 12 months ago, ever since he attacked Edge on that famous edition or infamous edition of Monday Night Raw after Edge returned at the Royal Rumble, Randy Orton has been golden. Now, over the course of the last 12 months, of course, there's been up and downs with his feuds, whether it's against The Big Show or Drew McIntyre or whoever. But Randy Orton has been at the top of his game, and his promo last night was absolutely no different. It was just spectacular. It was an elite level promo. Not many people, not just in WWE, but in pro wrestling, can hang with Randy Orton when it comes to the microphone right now. He is just that good. So strip away all that stuff when it comes to the mask, the fire, the Fiend, the backdrop, the darkness, Alexa Bliss, fireballs, you name that stuff. In terms of just the promo, the delivery, the cadence, the verbiage, the mannerisms, the character acting, Randy Orton was just on another level last night. He was just on another level. Now when it comes to the look, I saw, again, a mixed reaction online, which isn't really surprising because this whole angle's been getting a mixed reception. You get one school of thought of people saying it's different. I'm enjoying it that it's different. It's unique. We've asked for unique and different. We're tired of getting the same old Monday Night Raw. This is different. So that's a positive. You've got the other school of thought, people saying that it's ridiculous. It's too over the top. I'm all for suspension of disbelief, but this is going too far. How can you believe him? He looks ridiculous in that mask, etc., etc. And I understand that people might think that, and I understand that people, when they were watching it last night, might have thought, oh, he looks ridiculous. He looks ridiculous. And I understand that it's pro wrestling, and I understand that The Fiend, but this is too far. And I disagree with that. I do disagree with that because, in my opinion, as I mentioned, we've asked for different. We've asked for unique. And sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for, because we've been crying out as a fan base. Most people have been saying Raw is so boring. We see the same things every week. WWE creative team is hardly creative. And then when they give us an angle like this that is creative and it is out of the box, and it is something we haven't really seen that much of, certainly in recent history, when it comes to the fire, these burns, obviously the really graphic image of the Fiend being burnt alive. at TLC, all of that sort of stuff. We get given that, and then the complaint is, oh, it's too unrealistic. It's ridiculous. Suspension of disbelief. Look at him in that mask. I know Randy Orton isn't burned. Well, my response to that would be that when I'm watching WandaVision, I know that Elizabeth Olsen isn't a witch, and I know that Paul Bettany isn't a machine. I mean, it's suspension of disbelief. At the end of the day, it is an entertainment TV show. When I'm watching Breaking Bad, I know that Bryan Cranston isn't this massive dealer. You know, it's a character. It's a character, and I don't want to call Randy Orton an actor because to a pro wrestler that's offensive, but you get my point. It's a scripted entertainment show. I don't watch that and I go, oh, Randy Orton isn't burnt, because if you look at that in the form of any other TV show or film, you're not going to enjoy anything. Every TV show or film you watch, you're going to go, that's not real, that's not really happening, because that's the nature of the beast. That's entertainment. That's how entertainment works. As I mentioned, I don't watch Robert Downey Jr. go, I know he doesn't have a suit at home and he can fly. I mean, it doesn't work like that. People, you know, you have to lose yourself in it. You have to lose yourself in it. It's called suspension of disbelief. And with The Fiend, any angle involving The Fiend, that's par for the course. You have to have that level of suspension of disbelief. You just have to. This is a guy that he's got one personality that's like a children's entertainer in the Firefly Funhouse. You've got another personality which is this dark, evil character that wears a mask and laughs and all this kind of stuff. He ripped Daniel Bryan's hair out. Everyone he touches changes. He's managed to change Alexa Bliss into a mirror image of himself. We'll touch on that in a second. So there's a suspension of disbelief when it comes to Bray Wyatt. That's just par for the course. It was the same with The Undertaker. And I know some people didn't like the supernatural element of The Undertaker, but that's the gimmick. That's the gimmick and that's the character. So I really didn't have much complaints about it. I appreciate that WWE is trying something different. I appreciate WWE is trying to go in a different direction. And in terms of the promo was excellent. The promo was just excellent. So I really didn't have a problem with that, and certainly, and we'll touch on this when we talk about Alexa Bliss in a second, there is certainly a big amount of suspense being built for the eventual return of the Fiend Bray Wyatt. There is no doubt that there is a big amount of suspension being built for that, and suspense being built for it, because it feels big. Whenever the Fiend does return, it's going to feel like a moment, and that's because of the great work of Randy Orton and Alexa Bliss. They're really helping hype up whenever the Fiend does return. Now, the question would be when it comes to Randy Orton is, you know, we're still a couple of months away from WrestleMania, but the time is ticking. This is a very dark and sinister feud for Randy Orton, and you would think he's going to transition from this feud to facing Edge at WrestleMania. How do you transition from setting someone on fire, having your face burnt, wearing this mask, all of that sort of stuff, into more of just a regular, pure hatred feud with Edge that we saw last year? That's going to be interesting, because you've got this feud at the moment that isn't really grounded that much in reality in comparison to the Edge and Orton feud, which is very grounded in reality. So it's going to be a stark contrast, but Randy Orton, you know, I just thought he was fantastic last night. He is such a versatile performer. I mean, not only can he be the vicious viper and all this kind of stuff that we've seen in recent weeks, he's taken another sinister turn. This is arguably one of the most dark versions of Randy Orton that we've ever seen. I mean, he's got the mask on, he's playing with fire, he's got the burns. I thought it was really well done. And I know I probably sit on one side of the fence and people probably sit on the other side, but I thought it was excellent. And I think this feud, I enjoy it. And maybe that's because I enjoyed the more entertainment side of some aspects of the business, and my threshold for suspension of disbelief is maybe higher than others. I don't know. But I do understand why people didn't like it. But myself personally, and this is all it is opinion. That's what makes pro wrestling so great, is sharing your opinions on things. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really well done. Now, we spoke about Alexa Bliss briefly there, but also we can talk about her because Alexa Bliss, to me, really was the star of the show last night, and she topped it off by defeating Asuka in the main event of Monday Night Raw last night. Now, the main event of this week's edition of Raw saw Alexa Bliss go one-on-one with the Raw Women's Champion Asuka. Now, the highly anticipated match turned out to be a spooky one with a lot of twists, as par for the course when it comes to Bliss and The Fiend recently. Alexa Bliss entered the match in her smiling, bubbly girl persona, the one that's most associated with Bray Wyatt's Firefly Funhouse persona. However, midway through the match, the lights went off and Raw then went to commercial. Now, when we came back from commercial, there was lots of speculation as to what we could see. Could we see Randy Orton? Could we even see The Fiend? Well, we didn't see either, because when the lights came back on, Alexa Bliss's entire look and behavior had changed. She'd now kind of morphed into a more fiendish version of Alexa Bliss. She was now wearing a black top, she stopped smiling and was sadistically looking at Asuka across the ring, who was legitimately scared. She was legitimately scared, and she kind of no-sold most of the offense after that from Asuka Asuka and with relative ease managed to defeat Asuka. Now Asuka managed to get a few strikes in, but it was finally Alexa Bliss who had the final laugh. She delivered Sister Abigail after waiting an eternity. She got her in the position and just stared at the camera for a good 30 seconds. It was a bit too long for me, but she pinned Asuka clean, the Raw Women's Champion, on Raw. Now after the match, there was some distortion in the camera work, and suddenly Alexa Bliss turned back to her smiling Firefly Funhouse persona once more. Raw then went off the air with Alexa Bliss saying, "Let me in the voice of the Fiend." Once again, divided opinion. I thought it was really well done. What was interesting to me is one of the big critiques of Raw last night, and I mentioned it on social media, and I know a lot of other people did as well, is I thought the production for Monday Night Raw last night was actually very bad. There was lots of sloppy production errors last night, whether it's cameramen getting in the way, a million camera cuts. They had a weird way of editing this Asuka promo before the match as well. They said, like, what do you expect to see on Alexa Bliss's playground tonight? And she went, I don't know. And they just cut to a random replay. When they were doing the WrestleMania report, they cut to a random shot of Alexa Bliss's Titantron in the arena about to go off. It was a very sloppy Raw when it came to production. It was really sloppy. However, the way they did this, with Alexa Bliss switching personas and then at the end of the match switching back to a Firefly Funhouse persona, I thought was really well done. And WWE is certainly making the most and taking advantage of the ability to pre-tape and the ability to switch things up on this closed set without fans in attendance. You can't do that Alexa Bliss switch at the end on a live show with fans in attendance. You just can't. The logistics aren't possible. However, when you've got no fans there, when you've got the virtual WWE Thunderdome, when you can pre-tape and when you have a closed set, it does open up the possibility to do different things. And that's what they did with Alexa Bliss. Now, I think one of the big points of discussion coming out of this match with Alexa Bliss and Asuka last night on Raw was, should Asuka have been be acting the way that she was? Should she have been pinned clean in the middle of the ring? I don't know about that one. Certainly Alexa Bliss now, I mean, she declared herself for the Rumble. We'll touch on that in a bit. She has to be the favourite for the Rumble. She now, by WWE booking, in which is, pin the champion, you get a championship opportunity. She must have a future Raw Women's Championship opportunity now. She has to. And she dominated Asuka. She dominated her. And throughout the whole show, even when Asuka appeared on Alexa Bliss's playground, she was terrified of Alexa Bliss. She was scared of her. And I don't know how I felt about that. This is Asuka. I've been complaining about her recently that she hasn't defended the title since something like November. In terms of a pay-per-view championship match, that was September. She's been largely forgotten about. She does feel like an afterthought, and that's not her fault. That's the creative fault. And I just didn't know if I liked Asuka, who was this once imposing, terrifying, bullish character, could destroy anyone. Nobody's ready for Asuka, right? That's the gimmick. She was terrified of Alexa Bliss during Alexa's playground, and once Alexa switched in this match, she was terrified of her once more. And I don't know if that's really the right way to go. When you look at Asuka as a champion, is that the way you want your champion to look, as someone that's scared and cowers down and got defeated easily? I don't know if that was the right thing to do. But let's move on from that. Let's talk about Alexa Bliss, because frankly, I mentioned Randy Orton's promo, how he was on another level last night. The only person that was ever close to his level last night was Alexa Bliss. She was the star of the show. She was the star of the show last night. In terms of her ability to pull off these two iterations of her character, the character acting, the promos, the acting, the way that she spoke, the way that she acted throughout the entire match, once she switched to that different persona, her facials, the way she sold the attacks, the way that she moved, the way that she sat, all of that, her body language was perfection. It really was perfection. She was just that good. Alexa Bliss came across like a total star last night. It was a 3-hour broadcast, and arguably it was built all around Alexa Bliss. It was all about Alexa Bliss last night. Because even that opening segment with Randy Orton and The Fiend, it's directed at Alexa Bliss. You have the Alexa's Playground segment with Asuka, and then you had this main event, which has a lot of people talking. Alexa Bliss was the star of the show last night, and she was absolutely fantastic. She was fantastic. And I think, you think about the Royal Rumble now, she not only pinned the Raw Women's Champion, she's got this Fiend-like side to her where she no-sells anything and destroys people. If she taps into that at the Royal Rumble, why wouldn't she win? Now, I know there have been discussions about maybe Bianca Belair winning the Royal Rumble, Rhea Ripley, but now, after last night's performance, Alexa Bliss has to be considered one of the favourites for the Rumble match. She just has to, because if she's got her own Fiend persona, which it looks like she does at this point, why wouldn't she win the Rumble match? And she, Asuka's the Raw Women's Champion. I don't know for how much longer. I thought they might switch the title last night, frankly. It to me feels like inevitable that at some point she's going to be the women's champion again, Alexa Bliss, because she's just, I mean, to use a bad pun here, on fire. I mean, she really is just that good last night. She was the star of the show. She was the star of the show for me. Speaking of Raw as well, we got a surprise cameo from Gillberg last night. Yes, Gillberg, on an edition of the Dirt Sheet, because WWE Hall of Famer Goldberg was advertised to appear on last night's edition of Monday Night Raw as a guest on the Dirt Sheet. I say advertised. Credit to WWE. In fairness to WWE, he wasn't really advertised. It wasn't like they advertised it all week or all day. They announced it during the show. Once they did that, to me, it always felt like Goldberg wasn't going to appear. If Goldberg has one of his rare appearances on the show, unless it's a surprise angle like with Drew McIntyre on Legends Night, they'll heavily advertise it because they're desperate for those numbers. So I don't even think WWE will go that far to advertise someone that isn't going to show up, at least not most of the time. So he was announced to appear as a guest on the Dirt Sheet hosted by John Morrison and The Miz last night on Raw. However, as it turned out, it was not going to be Goldberg, but his parody character Gillberg, who appeared on Raw. And if that was not enough, The Miz and Morrison also had a parody character of WWE Champion Drew McIntyre. In what was certainly a strange segment, The Miz mocked both Goldberg and Drew McIntyre. He sent a message to both of them, claiming that both of them will lose at the Royal Rumble later this month, as he will cash in his Money in the Bank contract. Look, I think a couple of things first. When it comes to Gillberg, this is a guy back at the end of November, essentially December, he had a heart attack. He was in intensive care unit. He was in ICU. He had suffered a heart attack. Fast forward, 6 weeks later, he's on cable television on Monday Night Raw. I mean, that's a hell of a recovery. I'm glad to see Gillberg healthy, and I'm glad to see Gillberg back on TV, even for this cameo itself. I mean, talk about a recovery. I mean, you might think that your life's coming to an end, or you have your family and your friends worried about you. James Ellsworth of putting out social media posts telling us to pray for Gillberg because he suffered this heart attack. That was at the end of the month in November. And then come to January, halfway through January, he's on Monday Night Raw as Gillberg once again. That's incredible. What a story. What a story that is. Now, obviously, I do agree with some people that say, well, the guy did have a heart attack at the end of November. I mean, should he really be on TV at this point, considering not just because of the health issues, but also we are in a pandemic at the moment, and we know that if you've got underlying health conditions, that can be an issue. So that is a concern. I would hope WWE took all the precautions. I know he would have had COVID tests, and everyone else would have, so I'm sure he'll be fine, but that was something that played in my head at the time. But, I mean, great to see Gillberg back on Raw. I think when it comes to the Goldberg-Gillberg parody thing, I mean, we've seen it a lot. At this point, we have. It feels like every time, or the most times, that Goldberg has a WWE angle, we always see Gillberg at some point. We always do. Any Goldberg run eventually has a Gillberg show up. It just is always like that. The first time, of course, was in 2003 with The Rock, and that was quite iconic because that really was the first time that we had Gillberg and Goldberg in the same ring, because Gillberg was a shot at Goldberg during the Attitude Era. Right, that was the whole point, is they were mocking Goldberg when he was in WCW. They would say, nobody's chanting his name, I don't know where these chants are coming from. All of that, it was meant to be a parody of Goldberg. And when Goldberg was in WWE in 2003, and then they had the opportunity to have Goldberg and Gillberg in the same ring, that was funny. But since then, we've seen it quite a few times, whether it's Chris Jericho doing it, and now we've seen it with The Miz and John Morrison doing it. I mean, it's okay to revisit the well maybe a couple of times, but I'm not sure this time. But look, regardless of that, the fact that the guy was in intensive care unit only, 6-7 weeks ago, and the fact that he was on Raw last night, that was amazing to see. The Drew McIntyre guy as well, I do want to mention that because, as I mentioned, they brought out a parody Drew McIntyre guy that a lot of people are saying is David Krumholtz, who was the guy from Numbers. I think he was also in Alf as well. I think he was also, no, was it Alf or was it the Santa Claus? I might be getting my Christmas movies mixed up there. You can let me know in the comment section below. I think it's the Santa Claus. He's like the head Alf or something like that, right? I think so. I mean, Christmas has happened. It's come and gone. But it looks like him. It looked a lot like him. And people are trying to decipher whether it really was him or not. I don't want to, comment on someone's physical appearance, but wow. Wow. Not only did I think his Drew McIntyre impersonation was funny. I mean, as he was getting in the ring, his hair fell off, which was hilarious. But also after the match, he's sort of waving to the Thunderdome and he's got his back to the audience. You can see the guy's crack on cable television. That was hilarious as well. You know what? I didn't hate it. I didn't hate the segment. I didn't hate the segment, which is rare for me because when it comes to WWE comedy, it really isn't for me. As I mention all the time here on the channel, comedy's hit and miss anyway. It's either funny or it's not. If it makes you laugh, it's funny. If it doesn't, it's not funny. that's the issue when it comes to comedy. And the issue is when it comes to comedy in pro wrestling, a lot of the time it isn't funny because there's such a wide appeal and they're trying to cater to so many audiences, whether it is the younger audience, the sort of the young adults, and then the older people. That's the problem, is that sometimes it's not funny to anyone, or if it's funny to kids, it's not funny to anyone else. So that's the problem with comedy in pro wrestling anyway. I wouldn't say it made me laugh, because I didn't think it was hilarious. The parts I did think was funny was the Drew McIntyre stuff at the end. I was more pleased just to see Gillberg out there because of what he's gone through in the last couple of months or so. You know, I didn't hate it. And I saw people on social media that did hate it, and that's fine. That's justified. I can get it. I've sat through WWE comedy segments that I've hated before. That's comedy, to be honest. So I get it. I didn't hate it, though. And I never felt for any second that Goldberg was going to show up on Raw last night. And the same with Drew McIntyre, obviously. So that's what we got. The segment was more of a vehicle to try and get The Miz over and try and put some seed of doubts that The Miz could cash in at the Royal Rumble. So I think that served its purpose. Do I think The Miz will cash in at the Royal Rumble? It's a Goldberg match, so it's only going to go a couple of minutes. So I think anything's possible. Absolutely anything's possible. I mean, The Miz technically cashed in at TLC, but he didn't because John Morrison. We could see a similar situation at the Royal Rumble. So anything's possible. The only thing I would want to say as well about this segment is that just watching it, I know audibly we couldn't, but there's no way that if you looked hard enough and you listened hard enough, you could probably hear Vince McMahon cackling from the gorilla position. You know for a fact he was all over that segment. He loved it, especially when the Drew McIntyre parody showed his butt to essentially the world. Vince McMahon loves that. He loves that. So there's no doubt in my mind he was absolutely howling backstage when he was watching that. Speaking of McIntyre and Goldberg, though, it has been announced that not the parody characters, but Goldberg and Drew McIntyre will be on next week's edition of Monday Night Raw. And this time it won't be the parodies that was representing them on last night's edition of Raw. WWE has confirmed that both McIntyre and Goldberg will be present on next week's Raw, of course, which is the go-home edition of Monday Night Raw before the Royal Rumble. This was following McIntyre's own announcement that he would be back next week during last night's episode. Now, of course, McIntyre appeared once again last night via a cell phone video to confirm he would be returning to Raw starting next week. Of course, McIntyre's been away and out of action for the past 2 weeks after he tested positive for COVID-19 despite having no symptoms. As such, McIntyre was put in self-isolation for a 14-day quarantine, which ends this week. Now, Goldberg, on the other hand, his appearances are limited when it comes to WWE, especially in his contract, but it would make a lot of sense, right, to have Goldberg actually appear on another episode of Raw before the Royal Rumble. So we're going to have this confrontation last week. It's going to be interesting. Now, I think everyone thought this confrontation was coming. Has the build been hurt by McIntyre's positive COVID tests and the ability not to do these McIntyre and Goldberg segments on Raw? You know what? I don't know. I don't think it has, really. I think, frankly, this match doesn't need a lot of build. Is that because of Goldberg? Maybe. I mean, I'm still not keen on the match anyway, and I'm not keen on Goldberg being in that position, and it really terrifies me that Goldberg could win the WWE Championship at the Royal Rumble, because that is absolutely a possibility. When it comes to Goldberg being in world title matches, anything is possible and anything can happen. But has he needed to be on Raw the last couple of weeks? No, I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think the match sells itself. I think people are going to watch the Royal Rumble anyway. I don't think anyone is going to watch the Royal Rumble more because of Goldberg versus Drew McIntyre. I think they'd watch it anyway. So I don't think that, frankly, the match needs that much build. I think, obviously, the fact that McIntyre and Goldberg will be on Raw next week, obviously, will hopefully help the number for Raw. WWE will certainly be hoping so. So I'm interested to see how they play it out next week. I'm sure it'll probably be more shoving and more close headbutting. It'll be interesting to see if they get physical. Usually in these Goldberg go-home segments, there's either a spear or something involved, whether it's Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 33, but Lesnar hits an F5, whether it's The Fiend last year at Super Showdown, Goldberg hits a spear on The Fiend. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next. I wouldn't be surprised if we had some physicality next week. Speaking of Monday Night Raw as well, we have an update when it comes to the injury of Kofi Kingston. Now, as noted previously, former WWE champion. Yes, he was a WWE champion. Remember that. Kofi Mania is still a thing. Kofi Kingston is currently out of action with a jaw injury. Now, during the latest episode of the New Day Feel the Power podcast, Kingston explained that he suffered the injury after getting kneed in the face by Cedric Alexander in a match last month on Monday Night Raw. He said, back to when I injured my jaw, so I got kneed in the face by Cedric Alexander 3 weeks ago, and a couple of my teeth were chipped, and it was fine, it was cool. The point of impact was really sore, so I thought, okay, it's a bruise or whatever. The next week we had a 6-man match, and everything was fine. A little pain, but not terrible. Now, following that 6-man tag team match, Kingston and his partner Xavier Woods dropped their tag team championships to the Hurt Business at the TLC pay-per-view in December. But as the weeks progressed, Kingston said that he aggravated the injury. He said, quote, "Then the next week, right before we went out, it just kept feeling like it was loose. As soon as we got out there to the ring, I'm moving around and now I'm feeling it kind of come out of place and it felt like it wasn't set in." Now, Kingston did mention that he felt like he could have had continued to compete with the injury if there were fans there. He said, quote, "I feel like if fans were there, I wouldn't have felt that much pain. Throughout the whole match, every time something would happen where I would get hit or whatever, I would just grab my jaw. The entire match, I'm thinking about it the whole time, but if we had fans there, I'd been not necessarily injured, but hurt the whole match. You just feel the adrenaline of the crowd, and that just makes you will your way through. So I don't know. It changes the whole dynamic of just what we do, and the approach even. It's just really, really strange, and I don't know if it's for the better or worse. I guess the best way I can describe it is just being different." Now, of course, during last week's episode of Raw, the commentators announced the news of Kingston's broken jaw. Kingston later took to Instagram TV to confirm his injury. Now, there's no word as of yet on how long Kingston will be out of action. Of course, on Raw as well, Mustafa Ali has been facing off against Xavier Woods. Mace defeated Xavier Woods last night on Raw. The whole point of that storyline as well, which I really do like, is Mustafa Ali doing a callback to the whole Kofi Mania element of WrestleMania 35, because, of course, Kingston only got that big push because Mustafa Ali was injured at the time. It was meant to be Mustafa Ali at the time facing off against Daniel Bryan. He got injured by Randy Orton, so Kingston steps into the Elimination Chamber. He has the Gauntlet match, they have the Chamber match, and Kofi Mania becomes a thing at expense of Mustafa Ali. So I really enjoyed that callback. They did a promo that they posted on social media. They posted it on Raw in the end as well, where Mustafa Ali said basically, "I'm going to ensure that you know how it feels to have to sit home at WrestleMania and watch someone else take your spot and thrive in it." I thought that was a fantastic callback. But obviously, when it comes to Kofi Kingston, hopefully the injury isn't too serious. He can be back soon. We're getting to the biggest and best time of the year, whether it's Royal Rumble season. How many Royal Rumble moments has Kofi Kingston been involved in, especially as well when he comes to WrestleMania season? So hopefully he'll be back by then. We just don't know really the severity of the injury right now. Speaking of the Royal Rumble as well, as I mentioned earlier, we have some more participants declared for the Royal Rumble. Actually, I want to start, before I actually get into this, I want to declare my entry for the Royal Rumble, because apparently that's all you have to do. You just have to declare yourself, unless you're Drew Gulak or Ricochet. They can't declare themselves. How crazy is that? How crazy is that? Nevertheless, Alexa Bliss and Shayna Baszler are now official for the Royal Rumble match. Bliss and Baszler both declared their Women's Royal Rumble match spots during separate segments of last night's Raw show. There are now 21 spots left in the 30-woman Royal Rumble match. Bliss and Baszler now join Nia Jax, Charlotte Flair, Bayley, Bianca Belair, Mandy Rose, Dana Brooke and Peyton Royce as confirmed participants for the match. Alexa Bliss, as I mentioned, she's absolutely, I think, one of the favourites right now. Considering that performance last night on Raw, she has to be one of the favourites. But again, what is with this whole declared entry thing? It's bizarre. It's really bizarre. I mean, I just don't get it. I don't get it. You got people like Jeff Hardy, Alexa Bliss, all these other people going, "I declare my entry for the Royal Rumble." That's all you have to do. It's almost become comedic at this point. It's laughable. It's kind of like, you know, when WWE last year, everything had to have a tagline. Whether it was WrestleMania, Too Big for One Night, or Money in the Bank, a Risk versus Reward, or the greatest wrestling match ever. Everything had to have Extreme Rules, the horror show, Clash of Champions, Gold Rush. Everything had to have a tagline. This year, the big tagline for the Royal Rumble is, "I declare myself for the Royal Rumble match." So you're doing that. But then you've got these segments where Drew Gulak and Ricochet say, "I want to be in the Royal Rumble," and Adam Pearce goes, "No." Why not? Everyone else is doing it. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So, I don't know. I declare myself for the Royal Rumble match. There you go. I'm in it. Unless Adam Pearce wants to cut me off. Let's talk about Ryback and Mark Henry. We spoke about this yesterday because the online heat between Ryback and Mark Henry has continued. As I mentioned yesterday, over the weekend, the World's Strongest Man had some strong words for Ryback during appearance on the Busted Open radio show that he hosts. Ryback later responded with a lengthy Twitter statement on how he loves pro wrestling and how Henry helped him when he was with WWE. This all comes on the fact of Ryback calling pro wrestling fake and calling titles props. But after a response from Henry, Ryback made some more comments overnight which have since been deleted. Remember yesterday he said he didn't want to get into personal attacks and he didn't want to throw mud, as it were, and he didn't want to get personal? Well, he got personal very quickly. Ryback has alleged that John Cena did not want to work with Mark Henry on WWE live events because of how Mark Henry was in the ring. Ryback then also claimed he stepped up to work with him instead. He said, "Let's also just effing air it all out there. John Cena didn't want to work with Mark Henry on live events because he believed Mark was the SH, you can do the rest. So I stepped up and offered to work with him, which was much harder on me physically, but knew we would get great reactions." Ryback has since deleted that tweet. Ryback also claimed that a WWE producer insulted Mark Henry after Henry was allegedly found asleep in gorilla position before their WrestleMania 29 match in 2013 between Ryback and Henry, which Henry won. He said, quote, "I'm also going to say this. Mark Henry was asleep in gorilla prior to our WrestleMania match. A producer came over to me and said, good luck working with that fat piece of SH, you know the rest. Mark didn't want to spend a lot of time coming up with a good match, and we got what we got. Hashtag facts." He deleted that tweet as well. Ryback also made another now deleted tweet and said that WWE put Henry up to it. He said, quote, "If I'm a failure and I've beaten him based off his claims of what makes someone successful or not in wrestling, what does that make him losing to such a failure? I will break him apart like no other, along with the SH, you know the rest, company that doesn't care about him, that puts him up to this." Now, Mark Henry, of course, had to respond to this on Busted Open Radio yesterday and had a lot to say in response to Ryback. There's quite a few quotes here, so bear with me. He said, quote, "Sometimes the things that make you better and the things that make the world interesting is a conduit, something that's in between greatness and a talent, and what you do to bring them together. In pro wrestling, is the most important thing in wrestling, because you have to have a guy that can lead somebody that's the SH, you know the rest, and make them somebody that's great one day. We've all had our moments. There was a day when, guys, I hate to say it, I was SH, you know the rest. It sucks to say it, but I'll tell you what. At the end of the day, I was pretty effing good. Even when I was working with people like Ryback, I could take a nap and be better than that MFer any day of the week. Holler at your boy. WrestleMania, when some supposed agent said it, yeah, okay, I believe that SH. I believe that I'm the SH. Oh, let's see me. After you left, the guy you said, John Cena, you put John Cena out on Front Street, and I'm sure John Cena would probably make a statement about how when he first got into wrestling, who did he ride a car with? Me. Who's the guy that went to the office and say, hey man, you all need to see John Cena rap. This dude is talented, they said. You know what, this is awesome. John was mad at me because he didn't want to be looked at as the rapper guy, but you got Thugonomics, you're welcome. F you, Ryback. You're going to tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about, that I'm not great, that I was the SH, you know the rest. You based it off, and you throw it off an unnamed agent. Name his name. You name John Cena. Name this agent. I'll call him. I'll get him on the show and I'll say, listen, I'm not saying anything that this happened, but at any point, did you ever tell Ryback that I was the SH, you know the rest? I was famous for taking naps. I take naps every day. There's nothing wrong with it. It's great. Vince McMahon himself has ribbed me, poured water on me while I was sleeping because everybody would go, hey, is anyone got eyes on Mark Henry because he usually naps around this time? Find him. Oh, yeah. We had a lot of fun off my naps. So Mark Henry was no doubt willing to fire back when it comes to Ryback, and he should. I mean, those are pretty inflammatory comments when it comes to Ryback. And again, this is when it gets all laughable again, because yesterday Ryback, first of all, he does that comment about pro wrestling, which of course got a lot of people angry, and it would. It's offensive to a lot of people in pro wrestling. As I mentioned yesterday, everyone can have their philosophy on pro wrestling, and I respect that, but once you start calling things fake and title belts prop, that's when you get to another level, and you have to be willing to accept the blowback for that. And he wasn't. Afterwards, he backs down. He goes, oh, I love pro wrestling. I love pro wrestling. Oh, why I wouldn't say that. I love pro wrestling. He's also complaining and calling it fake and props, but he's also complaining about John Cena not putting him over. That's the first part of that. And then he says, but I'm not going to get personal and I'm not going to go into attacks because I like Mark Henry and all that kind of stuff. What does he do less than 24 hours later? He goes into attacks. He calls Mark Henry bad in the ring, says that the producers didn't like him, says that John Cena didn't want to work with him. He's saying all this inflammatory stuff, and then he deletes it all because I don't know if it's either not true or the fact that he felt bad that he said it, or he's gone back on his word that he wasn't going to do attacks, whatever. This isn't about, oh, who do I believe in this situation? But Mark Henry comes across as far more legitimate. When it comes to all of this stuff with Ryback at the moment, he just comes across as so bitter about, oh, the WWE is against me, they're suppressing me, and people don't know the truth, and all this kind of stuff. It's like, come on, guy, let it go. Let it go. It's been years at this point. You decided you wanted to leave. All this kind of stuff. And, who wins by slinging mud? Who wins? Certainly not the fans, because the fans just roll their eyes. And Ryback talks about getting suppressed on social media. Maybe this is just a way for the big guy to try and stay relevant. Because certainly I think everyone else has forgotten about him by this point. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Let's switch over to AEW briefly because AEW has announced a birthday celebration for -1 Brodie Lee Jr. This will be held this week on AEW Dynamite, taping in Jacksonville, Florida. AEW President and CEO Tony Khan announced yesterday there will be, quote, the world's biggest outdoor socially distanced birthday party for Brodie Jr. this week on Wednesday. The celebration will air on Dynamite. He said, quote, join us on Wednesday in Jacksonville for AEW Dynamite to honor Brodie Lee Jr. at the world's biggest outdoor socially distanced birthday party. He said, sing happy birthday and celebrate -1 together with cake and candles on TNT and international TV. Per Dark Order dress code, masks are required. Now, it was previously announced that a match would be held to celebrate Brodie's birthday, which would be Hangman Page, John Silver, and Alex Reynolds versus Colt Cabana, Luther, and Serpentico, Jack Evans, and Angelico. I don't know if that's going to be the case now. It looks like we might just see a happy birthday celebration or something like that. Nevertheless, I love it. I think it's fantastic. Again, during a really difficult time in this little guy's life and the family's life, Tony Khan and everyone at AEW are doing their best to put a smile on his face and give him as much joy as possible. I think that's fantastic. So huge credit to AEW and Tony Khan, and it's absolutely commendable of how they've helped the Huber family during this difficult time. It's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. And finally, we have some John Cena. Speaking of John Cena, it's not about Mark Henry or Ryback, but we have some update when it comes to John Cena's upcoming Peacemaker TV show, because director James Gunn has revealed on Instagram that production began this past weekend on John Cena's DC series Peacemaker on HBO Max. Filming is now underway in Vancouver, British Columbia. Gunn wrote, quote, that rhymes, 5 months ago, while quarantining, I was almost done editing The Suicide Squad and had just turned in the draft of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and was awaiting notes. Normally, I would try and take a break during that time and go on vacation, but with COVID, that wasn't happening. So, having nothing else to do, I started writing a TV series, Peacemaker, mostly for fun, as I didn't believe it was ever going to happen. I wrote a whole first season in 8 weeks. And now here I am in my trailer on the first day of shooting. Life is surreal. Let's go and go safely. Now, the Suicide Squad spin-off will explore the origins of the character that John Cena is playing, the Peacemaker, in the 2021 Suicide Squad film. Season 1 will feature 8 episodes. Cena is also serving as executive producer on the new HBO Max series, along with Gunn and Peter Safran, who is the producer of the Suicide Squad. Gunn is writing all 8 episodes and will direct several of them. Cena's character, which was created by Joe Gill and Pat Boyette, first appeared in Fighting 5 series, originally owned by Charlton Comics. He's a man who believes in peace at any cost, no matter how many people he has to get rid of to get it. The new HBO Max series will extend the world that Gunn is creating in the feature film, which is scheduled for release in theaters on August 6th this year. As a big comic book fan, I mean, I can't wait for Suicide Squad, especially James Gunn's version. It's going to be so out there and so insane. I can't wait for that, and I'm really excited for this series too. So I'm all for it. I'm very excited for that. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of the news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved with the community below. Drop a comment. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really just helps out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak with you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.